So for this SPL, I chose to talk about prototyping, and the reason why I chose prototyping or chose to do this question is because while I was answering the question, it seems really interesting, like the whole process of the user telling the developer exactly what they wanted and going down and um, creating something for that user, and just a communication between the developer and the user seem to be efficient because they're literally telling them what they want. So, anyways, let's get started. So, what exactly is prototyping? Prototyping is a process in which developers create an information system without a formal process. And the steps into prototyping for developers is that developers get preliminary requirements from the users. So, what this means is that the users let the developers know what they want in that information system. Excuse me. And on to the next step is that the developers take those requirements and they create a prototype. And once the prototype has been developed by the developers, that's when the users test out the prototype to see if they approve of it or not. And if not, then the users, or that's when the users give feedback to the developers. And if the users don't like the prototype that the developers came up with, then the developers would have to go back to step 3, where the users tested the prototype, the new prototype that the developers created, and then give feedback again, and so on and so forth until the users are satisfied. And that's pretty much prototyping. So, what are the advantages of prototyping? One advantage is that it gives developers a deeper insight into creating a system that um, results in a better implementation of the requirements. So they get to familiarize themselves with what the user's requirements are and therefore create a better system for those users. Another advantage is that the prototype serves to clarify requirements, which means that there's no ambiguity um, between the user and the developer, and it's just straightforward communication. There's requirements that the developers must follow in order to create a system that works for the users. And by doing this, this improves the communication and it makes it more efficient for both sides. Another advantage is that it reduces risks associated with the software, and that's because the developers are given these requirements, these specific requirements, um, into developing a system for the users, so they'll know what to do and what not to do. And those are the advantages for excuse me, for prototyping. And just like there are advantages for something, there are also disadvantages. And the disadvantages for prototyping are that they could be consuming and expensive. Um, Obviously, if the users aren't satisfied with the system, then the developers have to go back and create a new prototype, and then the users will have to go and try it out again, and we'll have to give the developers feedback for that prototype, and that's just time consuming if it happens too much, and it's also expensive. Another one is that it can lead to false expectations for prototypes, and it could be as simple as just the users thinking that the system will be done faster than how the developers can faster than how fast the developers could create it. It could be simple as that. And also, it does not consider the integration of all other components. And that's because prototyping doesn't follow the formal steps into creating an information system. So those are the disadvantages. And we'll end this with some examples. So some examples of prototyping are animation and 3D printing. So these go through a process as well. So we'll just go back. It goes 3D printing and animation go through the steps of prototyping because they're developers who create these products or this animation, and they're tested out, and then they go through hits and misses and everything like that. So those are examples of prototyping. And that is all for this SPL.